Well, hello, my radio friends. Now, in this video installment, I wish to touch on kind of a general overview of everything I did, what it's going to take to recap this Kolster, in this case, a K21 power supply. Don't get hung up on the K21. The 21 is a model number, but because Kolster used the same power supply on a bunch of their late 20s sets. It was a very common power supply for the late 20s for Kolster. With that said, I want to touch on the layout and exactly what is actually employed. To the left here, this is your main power transformer. Of course, here is your main rectifier tube. And this can here is your 3 main filter chokes as well as all your filter caps. To the right rear here is your can with 2 audio transformers. And here's your 2 audio tubes. Here's your first audio, which is a 26, and your second audio, which is a 71. Now, the can that we're concerned with is this center can. Once again, this is where your chokes and your caps are. And one needs to remove this can to get access within. Now, there's a kind of a plus and minus to this. First off, let's start with the big plus. Big plus, there is no tar to contend with. So that's a huge, huge plus, as we all could attest to. The negative is Kolster didn't do us any favors on the installation of this can, and certainly not at the concept of removing it. It's obvious when Kolster installed this can that the capacitor can was actually located within here and that it was already installed. The main cap can was affixed and held to the underside here by 2 metal straps one could see here with these bent over tabs. These tabs went to a strap, cradled that cap can underneath, and secured it to the underside of this can. To remove this can, this is kind of it's not difficult, but I just don't know why Kolster did it this way. One needs to straighten out these 4 tabs on top. I understand what Kolster did, because they already had the cap mounted to the underside with all the wires, and they just fed it through the chassis and dropped it in as a unit. But because we're reverse engineering it, we have to straighten these 4 tabs out, remove 4 screws. There's going to be 1, 2 on the opposite side, as well as, for whatever reason, 2 tabs similar to these on the underside of the chassis one needs to straighten out. Not terribly difficult. I take a little screwdriver, a common screwdriver, about a medium-sized screwdriver, and tap underneath them, just get them lifted a little bit. Then I take I took these as a matter of fact, and just got up underneath the edge, the lip, and straighten them out. Not difficult. Once those 4 screws are removed, then the tabs are straightened out, one could merely slide this cover off. Now, of course, this is not what you're going to see because I've already recapped it. What you're going to be met with is these 3 filter chokes. Poised on top of them is going to be this can one sees here. Inside this can, there's 6 capacitors and 10 wires leading in and out. And this sits right on top of those chokes. Now, I have to say, Kolster did us a big favor with their documentation. It's rather impressive. On the schematic, Kolster took the time to show this block and show what caps are within, how they're laid out, and actually a numerical reference to where each one is on the schematic itself down here. So it makes it really easy to identify and check and test and so forth. So kudos to Kolster for taking the time to give us this layout of what's inside the can. And not only did they do that, on the can itself, they affixed a paper label, once again, showing the capacitors, how they're connected to these respective wires, their values, and of course a pictorial layout. So kudos to Kolster. Now when you take the cover off, this is going to be mounted just like so. These 10 wires across here. I'm going to recommend you take a piece of, I use masking tape, and I just wrapped around each wire, labeled them 1, 2, 3, all the way across to 10 on the lower edge of this wire to identify the 10, starting with 1 here, going all the way across, referencing to exactly what's on the schematic here. 1 through 10, I labeled across there. And of course, once again, as to what's here. So, I mean, the references are there. It's relatively easy to follow. I just labeled them 1 through 10. Once I had them labeled, I merely cut each and every one and removed this can. At that point, I installed new capacitors on a piece of perf board, one sees here. And originally, there were 3 2 microfarads, 2 1 microfarads, and a 0.1 for a total of 6 caps. For ease and simplicity, and there's no harm in this regard going up a little bit, I went to 3 microfarad on all these 5. The 0.1 I left as a 0.1, and I just merely took the original wires and soldered them to the perf board where I had these wired all in accordingly. It works out rather well. Once that's all wired in and dropped in place, then all one has to do is lower this can back down onto here. And then I'm going to install these 4 screws only. I'm not going to bend those tabs in the bottom. I'm going to install these 4 screws, 2, 2, and 2, and 2, and call it good. It's not a terribly difficult task. It took a little bit of time, just because, of course, having to make this board up and so forth, but not terribly difficult, especially, once again, with the layout they provide. So, anyway, I hope that added some degree of clarity. Hope that added, answered a couple of the questions you may have. But certainly, if you have questions at all, feel free to ask, and we will proceed a little further, and before shortly, I'll have a video of the set in operation. So thank you so much for following. If you have any questions, ask. And until next time.